The opening connect indicates that God shows his power supremely parcendo et miserando, sparing and being merciful. In the diary of St. Faustina, we have this leitmotif that mercy is the greatest gift and character of our God vis-à-vis us, poor sinners who, like the publican, dare not even raise our eyes to heaven, but beat our breast, as we do actually at the beginning of Mass, in that posture actually, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, which comes precisely from this Gospel. In Welsh there's an old hymn, Pechader aflan ydw, an unclean sinner I am, and sefyll o hir bell, standing from afar, arousing him for mercy, please. I remember hearing from my grandfather, who'd lived through the revival of 1904 or 5 as a young man, wept like a hurricane, and the police would be just in church praying and singing. They had nothing to do. And the policeman was on his knees next to the drunken man to be brought to the prison the other day. The whole Spirit of God was working on the broken hearts of men. Broken hearts. And a great prayer went out at that time from earth to heaven from Wales. Plead me, bend us, break us. That's our truth. The other, the Pharisee, is full of himself. Oh, and like this publican either. And the Lord warns. What category are we in? And we may be surprised. Years ago, translating the Purgatory manuscript, I found this passage from the Beyond, where the nun being purified in Purgatory warned about taking lightly the gift of indulgences. It's a form of pride. I don't need them, thank you. This day, from already midday onwards until tomorrow midnight, we have access to plenary indulgence. Actually, in this parish church, any parish church, because it was extended from a Franciscan church. And in case you weren't aware of its origin, I just briefly mention it. Porzione, it just means a small portion. It was always given to the church. It was a Benedictine monastery. From the 4th century onwards, it was claimed by heaven, and it was in bits, and the Lord wanted St. Francis to build it up again. And he did. And when he'd done so, following the Lord's own injunction, he went to see Pope Honorius III, who was at Perugia at the time, not too far away. But he'd had this strange experience. He had pleaded with the Lord, with whom he was very intimate, for a special favour, that this little church, which by the way you can see inside the bigger church, Santa Maria degli Angeli, a church within a church, that everyone who came there would have a special grace of indulgencia, complete cancelling of sin. The Lord was pleading him back, as it were, bartering, negotiating. What you ask of me, Francis, is very hard. And he insisted, as the saints do. And because of his insistence, the Lord said to him that he would have this request. But he had to address himself to his vicar on earth, the Pope. And he did so. And with the same insistence, he pushed and pressed, and the Pope gave something he'd never given before. And with time it was extended to the whole church, and therefore to this parish church as well. But let's get this straight. An indulgence works in proportion to our work. It's not a slot machine. It depends on, and the church actually insists on this in all its documents. It works fully if we are fully free of any attachment to even venial sin. So that's the proportion. However, it does work. And the church tells us how to make it work. The conditions are these: confession, and it would work already if you came last Sunday, because it's 8 days. And that confession must be precisely sincere and from the heart. And I would remind you, a confession does not have to be very long. It has to be a confession. And that means you name the sins and then you leave it there. You don't need to add any fluff or padding. The Lord knows, but he asks why? For this one act of humility, of confessing it to someone else who represents him, with that supernatural vision, but it's to Jesus that one is confessing. And that's the bit that people forget: human respect. And when we say, and I firmly resolve, we actually mean it. Otherwise, we're using God as a rubber stamp to carry on. That's what we do, if we're honest. Do we change from one confession to the next? Do those bad words, those unpleasant words still come out? And so on and so forth. Are they handled? That's the proof. So, specifically for this indulgence, the act is that of coming to a parish church or a Franciscan church between now and midnight tomorrow. In that church, to indicate you're belonging to the church, to say a form of the creed, and to indicate your existence as a Son of God, the Our Father. That's the minimum. And then separately from that, a prayer for the Holy Father's intentions. And communion on the day. Now, you may recall from your history lessons that somebody who wasn't keen on indulgences and wrecked the church initially on that subject was Martin Luther, who was, when I was growing up, my great hero. I wrote to him, actually, a lovely one in Welsh, as it comes to in translation, about the power of God as our tower and strength. But I didn't realize, actually, until much later on, that the story is not quite so simple. Now, I wish well to Martin Luther, but I was a bit upset when I discovered this about him in recent times. I'll probably get corrected for saying this, but it's true. And why should I not give you the truth? There was a holy nun, Sister Maria Serafina, notice the name, Seraphim, Micheli, who founded the Order of the Sisters of the Angels and had mystical communications with them all the time. She was beatified 100 years after her death. Her death was in 1911, and she was beatified in 2011 by Pope Benedict. It was happening at a distance from Rome in Benevento, where she founded and lived. Now this bit is the bit that's puzzling. She, when founding and forming, was very hard on her sisters on one point and one point only: pride. She wouldn't tolerate any element of pride in her sisters, and there's a reason for it. It's this. Are you still comfortably? Then I shall begin. She had a great devotion to the Blessed Sacrament and would never let a day go by without spending time with Jesus, at least in the tabernacle, if she couldn't find it exposed. And she was on a journey, got out of the train, and looked immediately at the end of this day, dusk, for anywhere where she could adore and praise her beloved. But in doing so, she found that the village was full of people, and there was all kinds of things going on, but she didn't really care what it was. All she wanted was the Lord. She discovered that the emperor himself, Wilhelm I, he was going to preside something huge, but hadn't a clue or any interest what it was. The whole place was awash with activity. But she found her church, but it was closed. So she knew the Lord was inside and knelt to adore the Blessed Sacrament in the church. Suddenly, an angel came to her and said, "Arise," I quote here, because it is a Protestant church, therefore the presence wasn't there. Then he added, "But I want you to see where," now this is the point, this you should know about, Martin Luther was condemned. And the pain he suffered as a punishment for his pride. It was then, and only then, that she realized that it was all to do with Martin Luther. It was 400 years since his birth in that very place, Eisleben, in Saxony. And then she saw this huge abyss open before her mind's eye, and she saw right down to the bottom. And this is what she was given to understand. At the bottom of this hole there was a man, Martin Luther, who differed from the others. He was surrounded by demons. Now this is the bit that forced him to kneel. To kneel! And how many people kneel? You celebrate Holy Mass now with people sitting in the pews. I hear regularly testimonies of people who have been involved against their will in house masses where they're all sitting around a table, no question of kneeling. The Lord of hosts. Pride! He is Lord. And we do not lord it over the liturgy either. We receive it in reverence and awe. Ask an Eastern priest, an Eastern patriarch, to meddle with the divine liturgy, and he'll tell you where to go very quickly. And so, it didn't stop there. These demons were trying to get him to kneel, and armed with hammers, they tried in vain to shove a big nail in the head. The head was his organ, and out of that head came a split throughout the church, still with us to this day. Now, I have always respected Martin Luther. I've studied him. He's a great author. And I still use his Lutherbibel, the Bible. He translated very well, which gave to the German language a dignity and a cohesion and a literary beauty which is worthy of Germany, as what came to Wales at the same time was, which gave us the Welsh language, and what came to England under James I, King James Bible. They were brilliant men. But brilliant men can start to become independent. And that's the problem. It can happen in a subtle way to us too, when we start to place ourselves in the judgment seat of Christ and pronounce judgment over other Christians, including priests, bishops, and pope. I make a jump. These reformers are not the same as their descendants. Talk now to a Lutheran and you'll not find that. E.g., one of the Pope, actually Pope Benedict's best friends, even when he was Pope, was a Lutheran bishop. They enjoyed each other's company, they were on the same wavelength, and they had a delight in the same culture. These are sincere men of God, and I know from experience that is the case. I would have been normally a Protestant pastor now had I gone on as I was going. and those around me were holy men of God. We must not in any way think that the descendants of these reformers are in a bad place. But it doesn't take away from the fact that they're missing the grace prepared for them. And if the doubt comes up, it must be looked at. And not to do so is to get into bad faith. And that actually happens. They will not discuss sometimes. Why? It's intellectual self-sufficiency, another form of pride. We do theology on our knees, I say, and under God and listening to the Holy Ghost. And he can't get through to a self-sufficient brain. I conclude. It hit me very strongly first time round in Rome, when I wasn't yet a priest. I had a great friend in the house, Norbertine College in Rome, Yindrik, that would be Henry. He was from the communist bloc. And in those days they were just opening up after communism and tried to open these houses. But he was received the Norbertine order in secret, all under cover, in persecution. He was ordained, he was younger than I was, and he was a walking encyclopedia. And every time there was a big day in some church in Rome, he'd tell me, do you know, he said one day, the two altars close to each other here in Rome. One, the altar where St. Maximilian Kolbe said his first Mass, and the other, not far away, where Martin Luther said his last. A couple of years later, when I was ordained, I came back to Rome, I looked for the altar and celebrated Holy Mass, one of my first, on St. Maximilian Maria Kolbe's altar. It was actually the altar where Our Lady had appeared to a Jew after he'd received the miraculous bed and put it round him. She appeared to him and gave him, just like that, the whole Catholic faith. The other is not far away, and it really hit me. Grace. This was one of my first Masses, and it had been the first Mass of Maximilian Kolbe. It went to the maximum of glory. Our Lady appeared to him when he was young, a child, and presented two crowns to him, one white and the other red. Which do you prefer? I'll take the two! And he had the two. Pure as a lily and red from martyrdom, which he himself had assumed for another man at Auschwitz, a portion of hell on earth. The other, Martin Luther, a brilliant man who wanted to reform the church, but missed the point and did harm, and walked up for the last time to the holy steps and broke up the church. My friends, that grace is what we have here at the altar. The devil hates it, he despises it, he wants it very, very camouflaged in the human, if possible even unavailable. But the grace is unchanged. However, we have to collaborate. And if we do not, we are treating God, I say, as a slot machine and damaging ourselves, for grace abused withdraws itself and leads to hardening